right, Grayzone. So Grayzone Warfare just released today in early access on Steam. You could get access to it for $35 base or up to $100. I played it for 2 hours and I requested a refund. And I have a lot of issues with this game in just my 2 hours of playtime. I got a whole list. I'm going to run down the list. Here we go. Number one, we have the overall game systems are very confusing. I'm going to start off very simple with hotkeys, okay? Your VoIP key, which is incredibly important into the video game, it is your only means of communicating to the rest of your faction in the game, is bound to Z, and you can't change it. It's just Z. And number two, there's no toggle sprint, which is something a lot of people wanted from the playtest. And there's no toggle ADS. So you have to constantly hold it, and it's really awkward, and I don't like that either. Another point brought up, factions. Why do we have factions? We have 16 versus 16 versus 16 for my whole 2 hours of playing. I was in one town and didn't necessarily interact with any of the other factions. I do like the fact that I teamed up with a random, and we were able to VoIP, because the VoIP is very good. But much other than that, I don't quite understand it. We go on to the combat. The fighting just feels not good for a multitude of reasons. The movement itself while fighting feels weird. Leaning and walking is a snail's pace, so you can't really do that. Just the way your character looks, ADSing with the arm out like this. The shooting feels a little weird as well with the recoil, and the AI was just not interesting to interact with. And then potentially a problem that we didn't run into, but a problem that you can definitely run into, and a lot of people ran into it in the playtest, was LZ camping, where they would just camp a spot where the helicopter loaded in and you would get jumped. They tried to remedy this a little bit, but I don't think they did enough. Another thing in-game, the meds themselves are incredibly confusing. The damage system you get inflicted, you have like bruises, you have bleeding, you have organ injuries, you have all of these things, and you have all these meds, and none of them have any descriptions on what they heal. There might be some sort of ordering that, you know, if you don't know, you don't know. And reading the individual meds doesn't provide you any clarity other than maybe a bandage bandages bleeds or something. But there's plenty of other meds, and there's no real, I don't know, tangible knowledge gained from reading the descriptions. I'll say another big area of weirdness is looting. Number one, there's not a whole lot of loot around the maps. I'm sure that's something they could fix, but as of right now, there's like food and some meds. One weird thing that I don't know how they didn't think of this is when you loot a container, it will show that there's nothing in the container, but there is stuff in the container. So like Tarkov, when you open a container, there's X amount of gray slots in the container, and you're like, oh, there's 3 things in here, there's 4 things in here, whatever. In Grayzone, it's just a blank box, and you have to wait, and stuff might pop up. Shout out chat for helping with that one. And I guess I would say, since there's not a ton of loot, there's no like value of the loot, so there's no real incentive to like get the loot out unless it was a task item. Another point I would like to make is how empty the game itself felt, even in the beginner area where it's mostly PvE. The AIs spawned in the same areas, and they were pretty sparse. You'd fight like 4 at a building, and like that was kind of it, but you just had like free roam. And in a game that's like PvE VP with a lot of focus on the E, that's a little weird to me. Fighting the AI felt either incredibly boring, like super simple, or really unfair. This is probably my biggest and hardest point to explain, but I felt like I was fighting the game with something as simple as movement. Sprinting in a straight line is great, right? But the second you tap the D key or the A key, your move left or right, you immediately stop running. And it's just a bizarre choice. Like, stop your movement in such an awkward way. I don't know how else to explain that. The shooting feels like fine. It's not overwhelming or underwhelming. From the preview videos that they released, they were like super juiced up about these ballistics and how it would affect your character and stuff, but I don't think it is impactful in any way. And then I ran into one of my favorite bugs of all time. And I wonder if I was one of the first people to do it, but there's a bug that's been in Tarkov for years and years and years, and they've tried everything they do to get rid of it. It's called the busy hands bug. Your character gets stuck doing whatever it's doing, so it's like healing or eating or reloading or whatever. It gets stuck, and then you can't shoot, you can't move, you can't like do a whole bunch of things. And I was lucky enough to run into it, And what's interesting about the busy hands bug in Grayzone is that there's no remedy to fix it other than dying, because you can't Alt F4 or you lose your whole kit. We didn't even get to test it, but I'm pretty certain I wouldn't even be able to use the helicopter. Another big point of fighting the game, I don't know if the word I want to use is sloppy. The UI for interacting with the stuff in Raid, you know, character to character, or like character to container or character to body, right? The UI for that is atrocious. It doesn't pop up in spots you would want it to pop up, i.e. opening a door. I can't just touch the door. I have to focus on the handle, and then I hit open, and then the door like creaks open. And sometimes you could even block the door opening. The other instance of this is your character's bleeding out, and in this game you can heal your teammates. My buddy was trying to heal me, and I crouched by accident. It broke the heal. And even examining another player, you have to be in the right spot, and then if they move, it breaks the chain. And that is incredibly frustrating for what I would think is a really cool, interesting mechanic of being able to help out your teammates. It gets broken immediately, and it feels like doo-doo. The next thing that we want to talk about is, like, I'll say the goals portion. There's no, like, real goal, and you could argue there's no, like, real goal in Tarkov either, but there's tasks, and they don't feel particularly impactful in the sense of, like, the money doesn't seem to matter, but maybe it does if you keep dying a lot. Even if you keep dying a lot, you can always attempt to get back to your body and preserve your loot that way. I think I played for 2 hours on one kit, and I didn't even feel like I was in any danger of losing that kit. And again, that was in a mostly PvE area. That is something to take a grain of salt with. In relation directly to Tarkov, where I feel like every raid you run in Tarkov, whatever your character is doing is important. Every decision you make is important. It certainly felt less directly impactful in Grayzone on like pathing or anything because I could always just get back to my body. I think that is a real big, like, weird thing that kind of breaks it, that you could always just get back to your body to get the loot. And then the last thing I want to know, I bought the $35 package, and if you purchase the bigger packages, they count as DLC and they're non-refundable. So then to like wrap it up, it kind of feels like it's lacking direction. It has all of these systems in the game that seem to be good on paper, but there's no like real coherence to them. And it doesn't give the player, I mean, I didn't feel any stress at all, and I didn't feel any direction or goals to attempt. Like, I didn't feel like getting a task done was super important at any time. For a game that is PvEVP, and they themselves have said they really want the E to be the important thing, the AI isn't great. There's not a lot of it. The game feels incredibly empty and devoid of not only other enemies to interact with, but even loot to interact with. And I think it's just not there. I think it was potentially rushed because of all the negative Tarkov news. They were trying to capitalize on something, and hey, that's just business. But I don't think the product was ready. I think a lot of streamers that participated in the Content Creator Week certainly said it wasn't ready. I think it needs to go back into the oven to rethink a lot of the base systems. And I'll just say that I spent 2 hours on it, and I'm trying to get a refund. I did not think it was worth it. I did not have a ton of fun in the 2 hours, and nothing hooked me the way other games have hooked me. So I don't know at this point if it is worth it, but I just didn't enjoy it. I don't think it's very good.